is May Whitlock, and my husband threw divorce papers at me like I was trash he'd forgotten to take out. He didn't hand them to me. He launched them across the room so hard the metal clips snapped off and skittered across the floor. And he didn't do it alone. No, he brought his new girlfriend with him, like she was some kind of prize he'd won for betraying me correctly. Brielle stepped inside my house, my grandmother's house, in red heels so sharp they clicked like warnings on the hardwood. She looked around with a smile I can only describe as hungry. Jason pointed at me like I was a tenant he needed evicted. "You've got 48 hours to move out, May. We're not dragging this out." "We?" He said we. Like she suddenly had authority over my life. Brielle flipped her hair, leaned on my kitchen island and said, "Oh, and don't touch the master bedroom. Jason wants it exactly the way we designed." We designed. That's when I felt it. Not sadness, not heartbreak. A cold, steady heat rising inside me, slow as boiling syrup. Because they didn't just betray me. They walked into my home, claimed my walls, my kitchen, my memories, and tried to evict me from the life I built. Jason slid a pen toward me with a smirk. "Sign it. The estate goes to me. It's the cleanest option." He really said that. He really believed it. But here's the part neither of them knew. The estate they were drooling over, the one they thought they'd stolen from me, it was already protected by a clause designed for snakes exactly like them. And the moment they tried to take it, they doomed themselves. Stay till the end. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here to witness this journey of justice. If you believe that truth and documentation matter when facing betrayal, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more people who need these stories. Betrayal is how quiet a home becomes afterward. Not peaceful, not calm, just quiet like the walls are holding their breath, waiting to see what you'll do next. After Jason and Brielle stormed out, I stood there with those divorce papers half crumpled in my hand, the ink smudged where my thumb had pressed too hard. My kitchen felt different, smaller somehow, as if their presence had shrunk the air. But I didn't sit, didn't cry, didn't collapse like they expected. I walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, and let it run over my fingers, not to soothe them, but to steady my thoughts. Because when a man humiliates you and brings his mistress to witness the show, that's not impulsive. That's planned. And if he planned that, then what else was hidden? I dried my hands on my apron and stared at the highlighted paragraph again, that glowing yellow streak that demanded the estate, demanded the land my grandmother guarded with her last breath. He really thought he could take it. He really believed he had the right. The silence around me deepened, not empty, just watchful. I thought back to the past month, all the small things I'd brushed off, the phone on silent, late-night showers, his sudden interest in business trips that produced no receipts, no real details, no tiredness a real man would have after working all night. Little things, sharp things, things that now fit together too perfectly. A month ago, he'd started locking his office door. Jason never locked anything. He was careless with everything, passwords, bills, secrets. But suddenly, he guarded that office like it held the nuclear codes. 2 weeks ago, Brielle began liking my posts from a fake profile. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. And just last week, Jason had asked, "What did the lawyer say about the deed transfer?" When I'd told him nothing needed to be transferred, the deed had been settled years ago. He'd frozen for a second. Just one. Barely noticeable. But I had seen it. I see everything. Especially motives. As I stood in my kitchen remembering those moments, I felt the air shift. A realization sliding into place. Jason didn't fall in love with Brielle. He fell in love with the estate, with the money attached to it, with the land value rising every single quarter, like a slow, sweet temptation. And Brielle, she didn't love him either. She loved power, position, the fantasy of walking through my front door and declaring herself the queen of a house she didn't even know the history of. I poured myself a cup of tea, not because I wanted it, but because it gave my hands something to do while my brain worked like a quiet engine. The steam rose slowly. The smell of Earl Grey filled the room, and that's when I heard it, a vibration, soft, rhythmic, coming from Jason's jacket, the one he'd thrown over the dining chair earlier in some careless rush to play executioner. The phone, his second phone. He thought I never noticed he had two, but I noticed the weight in his pocket. I noticed how he always kept one on silent. I noticed how he faced the screen away from me when it buzzed at dinner. The phone lit up again, glowing like a little snake in the dark. A message preview appeared. Did she sign? We need the deed, baby. She can't stall. B. Brielle. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. Her words were enough. That one message peeled back the whole rotten plan like old wallpaper. They weren't just cheating. They were coordinating. They were counting on me to crumble fast so the estate transfer would go through before I had time to question anything. They wanted me out of the house within 48 hours because they needed the paperwork done before my grandmother's clause kicked in at the end of the month. Oh yes, there was a clause. A powerful, beautiful clause. They had no idea. The phone buzzed again. May is too soft to fight. Trust me. She'll fold. Soft. I let that word sit with me for a moment. Roll over my tongue like a seed waiting for soil. Soft. If only they knew. I took a slow sip of my tea, the heat sliding down my throat like a promise. My eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward the closed door of Jason's office. Behind that door were documents, emails, maybe even a copy of their plan, but I didn't go in. Not yet. Because something clicked in that moment. Something sharp. Something final. What Jason and Brielle were doing wasn't an affair. It was an operation. A quiet, greedy mission built on arrogance and underestimating me, and the truth of it landed in my chest with a weight I couldn't ignore. They didn't break my heart. They tried to steal my life. I set the cup on the counter, the tiny click echoing through the kitchen like a starting gun. I wasn't going to sign those papers. I wasn't going to leave the house. I wasn't going to hand over anything, but most of all, I wasn't going to warn them. No. Sometimes silence is the sweetest revenge. And as I stood there, tea cooling beside me, the estate plan fresh in my mind, and Jason's second phone still buzzing with Brielle's impatience, I made the first calm, deadly decision of this entire story. I would let them think they were winning, just long enough, because when a snake believes you've fallen asleep, that's when it slithers closest. And I wanted them close enough to expose themselves, close enough to let me see every move, close enough to justify what I was about to do next. And that's the moment I realized this wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my justice. People think betrayal arrives like thunder, loud, sudden, impossible to miss. But the truth? It starts as hairline cracks, thin, sharp, almost invisible. Cracks you only recognize later when everything collapses. And now, standing in my kitchen with their messages buzzing on Jason's secret phone, those cracks shone like neon signs. The first fracture came one morning, 3 weeks before the divorce papers. I remember because Jason walked into the kitchen wearing cologne he never wore for me. Not the warm sandalwood scent I bought every anniversary. No, this was new, sharper, younger. The kind that announces itself before the person does. He claimed it was a free sample, but I could smell the lie before I smelled the cologne. Then came his smile, stretched too tight, like skin pulled over broken glass. "Breakfast looks great, May," he'd said, though he didn't touch a single bite. He just grabbed his coffee, checked his watch, and left like he had somewhere better to be. At the time, I wanted to believe he was stressed. Work, money, life. But now I see it clearly. That wasn't stress. That was preparation. The second fracture was quieter but deeper. I was folding laundry in our bedroom, his shirts crisp and white, the ones he claimed he wore for client dinners. A lipstick stain winked at me from the collar. Not red, not pink, fuchsia. The shade Brielle always posted in her mirror selfies. I stood there with that shirt pinched between my fingers, the fabric soft, the stain bold and careless. A stain you leave only when you forget the woman who washes your clothes might still be paying attention. Jason walked in right then, saw the shirt in my hand, and froze. For a split second, his face split open. Shock, guilt, fear, all fighting each other. Then it sealed shut again. "Oh," he said casually, "that must have been from the dry cleaner. You know how messy they can be." The lie was so lazy it almost offended me. Dry cleaners don't apply lipstick, but I didn't argue, didn't challenge, didn't raise my voice. I simply nodded, folded the shirt, and set it aside. Because something cold and instinctive whispered inside me. He's telling on himself without realizing it. The third fracture was the one that finally made me listen. Brielle posted a photo, not of Jason, but of a table setting. Wine glasses, candlelight, a menu folded neatly beside a gold-rimmed plate. I recognized the menu. There was only one restaurant in town that used those. A place Jason claimed was too pricey for our anniversary last year. But suddenly, it wasn't too pricey for someone else. The caption under her photo stung more than the image itself. With him, finally. No name, no face, just a shadowy reflection in the spoon. Tall, broad shoulders. The same watch I bought Jason for Christmas 2 years back. He really didn't care if I caught on, not one bit. But here's the thing about me. The thing Jason always forgot. I may move slow, but my memory is sharp. And once I decide to watch, I don't blink. 3 days after the restaurant photo, I found a jewelry box tucked inside Jason's office drawer. A velvet black box with a gold hinge. My heart stuttered. For a moment, a foolish, fragile moment, I thought maybe, despite everything, he was planning something for me. A gesture, an apology, something to catch me before I fell too far. But when I opened it, the truth hit me like cold water. Inside was a diamond pendant, a beautiful one, shaped like a teardrop. I flipped the lid, and there it was, the engraving, BP, my beginning. My beginning, not our, not May's, BP, Brielle Pierce. And with that, the fourth fracture cut straight to the bone. Jason hadn't just replaced me, he'd rewritten me, erased the history we built and handed it to another woman like a hand-me-down dress. I closed the box gently, not because I cared about the pendant, but because I realized something brutal in that moment. This was no affair. This was a blueprint. Brielle wasn't just the girlfriend. She was the future he'd chosen before he bothered ending the present he had with me. He was building a life with another woman, using the foundation of mine. And the estate? My grandmother's life work? The soil she protected like it was a living thing? That wasn't a marital asset to him. It was leverage, currency, the prize he wanted to bring to his new bride like a trophy. My hands went still. My breath steadied. And something inside me, something that had been trembling, unsure, wounded, hardened completely. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was clarity. Sharp. Cold. Exact. This man wasn't confused. He wasn't tempted. He wasn't lost. He was calculated. And he believed I was too soft, too trusting, too polite to ever notice. That was the moment. Right then, standing with that pendant in my hand and his bold handwriting staring back at me. When I made a quiet, steady decision, that's when I started watching. After that day, something inside me shifted. Not shattered, not collapsed, just quietly slid out of place, like a door unlatching on its own. I didn't argue with Jason, didn't confront him, didn't show him I knew anything. No, confrontation feeds men like him. Silence starves them. so I gave him silence. When he came home, late, from work, smelling of his new cologne and a woman who wasn't me, I simply offered him dinner with a soft smile that made him squint. He didn't know what to do with that smile. Guilt hates kindness. It can't digest it. He'd sit across from me, tapping his fork, glancing at his phone, waiting for me to accuse him, but I never did. Instead, I observed. He started changing his routines. Little things. Where he placed his keys, how he double-checked his phone, how he positioned himself so the screen always faced away. He thought I wasn't looking, but I saw it all. The emotional distance between us didn't grow loud. It grew precise. One evening, while Jason showered for the second time that day, using that same sharp cologne-scented body wash, I folded laundry on the bed. Folding clothes sounds calm, domestic, ordinary. But that night, each fold felt like a piece of evidence being set carefully in place. Shirts, pants, his ties with the faint perfume that never belonged to me. My hands were steady, almost too steady. My heart beat slow enough to hear the dryer humming down the hall. I folded his shirts with the same care my grandmother taught me. Crisp corners, smooth lines, edges perfect. The calmness in my hands contrasted the storm I kept buried under my ribs, because folding clothes meant control, order. A quiet ritual that made me feel like I still owned something in this house. Not him, not his mistress, me. As I smoothed the last shirt, Jason stepped out of the bathroom, water dripping from his hair, towel wrapped low around his waist. He glanced at the laundry with surprise. "You didn't have to do that," he muttered. "I know," I said softly, still smoothing a sleeve, the fabric crisp under my palms. Something flickered in his eyes. Unease. He didn't understand that tone. It wasn't hurt. It wasn't angry. It was distant. And distance? That scared him more than rage ever could. The next morning, he tried to make conversation, forced, awkward, like a man trying to memorize a role he didn't audition for. "May, we should talk about things," he said, buttering his toast so aggressively the knife nearly bent. "Of course," I replied gently, "whenever you're ready." He froze. That wasn't my usual response. Usually I filled in the blanks, offered explanations, tended to the wounds he never admitted he inflicted. But now I let the silence stretch. He cleared his throat. "Work's been hectic, I'm sure." Beat. His jaw tightened. "Why are you looking at me like that?" I wasn't looking at him any special way, just watching, observing the man who thought he could hide an entire second life in plain sight. "No reason," I replied, sipping my tea, my voice calm, steady, a perfect mask. He hated that. Men like Jason thrive when you're rattled, when you cry, beg, accuse, explode. But when you're calm, when you're collected, when you're emotionally unreachable, they panic. Later that afternoon, I found him standing in the hallway staring at the family portrait we took 8 years ago. He looked at it like it was a photograph of strangers. "I don't know when things got so complicated," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Instead, I gently wiped dust from the photo frame with the corner of my sleeve. He watched my hand move, slow, precise, and something tightened around his mouth. "May," he said again, voice strained, "tell me what you're thinking." I turned to him with the softest smile I could manage. "I'm thinking," I whispered, "that things become clear. Eventually." His eyes narrowed with suspicion he couldn't voice. Good. Suspicion meant he felt a shift he couldn't explain. It meant he sensed the distance, the new version of me standing in front of him, calm, withdrawn, unreachable. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was studying, watching patterns, matching lies with their twins, collecting every detail he accidentally revealed. Every day he trusted Brielle more and me less. Every day he slipped deeper into a trap he didn't realize he was building. Not my trap, his. And as that distance grew, something inside me crystallized into a single, sharp truth. Once you stop loving a man, you start seeing him clearly. And clarity, my dear, is the most dangerous thing a betrayed woman can possess. The day everything snapped into place didn't arrive with thunder or shouting. It arrived with a soft click, the sound of Jason's office door not closing all the way. That was my invitation. Jason had rushed out for a quick meeting, leaving his second phone forgotten in his jacket pocket and his first phone charging on his desk. 2 devices, 2 lives, 1 careless man. I stood in the hallway staring at that cracked door, the thin line of space glowing with afternoon light. For years, that office was off limits to me, not because he said so, but because trust had made me polite, respectful, blind. But that woman inside me now, the one he underestimated, the one he called soft, she didn't knock. I pushed the door open. The first thing I saw was a stack of envelopes on his desk. Thick white ones tied with a rubber band, legal firm letterheads, bank names, insurance companies, all addressed to Jason Whitlock. The second thing I noticed was the folder, a plain brown folder lying slightly open like it had been flipped through in a hurry. Inside were printouts, pages and pages of email exchanges between Jason and someone named MP Holdings. At first glance, they looked like property inquiries. But then I read the subject line, Whitlock Estate, Liquidation Timeline. Liquidation, not sale, not refinance. Liquidation. My grandmother's land, the land she protected with her will, her blood, her stubbornness. Reduced to a word that meant bulldozers and construction and the erasure of everything she left behind. And at the bottom of the page, in bold font, final approval pending spouse signature. Spouse. Me. My chest tightened, not with shock but with confirmation, the kind that tastes like metal and truth. Jason wasn't divorcing me for Brielle. He was divorcing me for money, for land, for greed sharp enough to carve out 15 years of marriage without blinking. My fingers hovered over the next page, the air thick enough to feel. It was an email from Brielle this time. Once she signs the transfer, we're in the clear. Push harder. She's too emotional to question anything. Too emotional. Emotion. That's what they thought my weakness was. Then I found the real bomb. A document notarized 2 weeks earlier, a revised version of our marriage agreement, filed secretly, without my knowledge. In it, Jason had requested full control over all marital assets, citing wife's declining mental stability. Mental stability. Now that made me laugh, a quiet, humorless sound that barely escaped my throat. He wasn't preparing for divorce. He was preparing to discredit me. My palms felt cold against the paper, but the worst was still waiting, tucked beneath everything else like a final knife. A handwritten note. Not dramatic, not long, not poetic. Just this. J. Timeline confirmed. May out by Friday. Contractor begins Monday. B will handle interior choices. Do not back out now. No signature, but the handwriting was familiar. His mother's. The woman who always smiled at me like she smelled something rotten. The woman who once told Jason he married below his potential. She was in on it. My breathing steadied, long and slow. Not panicked, composed. Because now I wasn't guessing. I wasn't assuming. I had proof. Proof that Jason wasn't just leaving me. He was removing me. Erasing me from the home, the history, the legacy my grandmother built. He was rewriting the future and assigning me the role of casualty. I set the papers down and walked toward his desk drawer, the one he always kept locked. Not today. Inside was a small velvet pouch. I opened it with steady fingers. Out fell a ring, not my wedding ring. A brand new diamond band, heavier, flashier, the kind Brielle would flaunt online with filters and soft lighting. The engraving on the inside burned through me. To my future Jay. He bought her an engagement ring. While still married to me, while plotting to take everything that wasn't his. I held the ring for a moment, feeling the cold metal against my palm, then placed it gently on the desk. No anger, no bitter tears, just acknowledgement. The final piece in a puzzle they thought I wasn't smart enough to solve. My phone buzzed. A text from Jason. "Heading home, get ready, we need to talk." Get ready. He had no idea how ready I was. I walked out of that office, leaving everything exactly where I found it. Not a paper moved out of place, not a drawer left open. I wanted him to think he still had the upper hand. I wanted him comfortable, confident, because a comfortable man makes mistakes. A confident man overplays his hand. By the time I reached the kitchen, I knew exactly what I would do. Not scream, not confront, not plead for truth I already had in my hands. No, I would use their lies, their arrogance, their certainty that I was fragile, and I would answer betrayal with something far more powerful: strategy. Jason thought he was ending my world tonight. He didn't realize he had just handed me the blueprint to destroy his. As I set a kettle on the stove and listened to the gentle click of the burner lighting, I whispered a vow. Not to him, not to Brielle, not even to the estate. I whispered it to myself. You will not take what was never yours. This wasn't pain anymore. This was purpose. And with that, the first spark of revenge lit itself quietly inside me, steady, glowing, unstoppable. Jason walked into the house that evening with the confidence of a man who believed he held every card. His footsteps were heavy, entitled, echoing through the hallway like he already owned the place. He didn't greet me, didn't look at me. He just tossed his keys on the counter and loosened his tie like a man preparing for a confrontation he expected to win. "May," he said sharply, "we need to discuss the divorce properly." His tone was clipped, rehearsed, as if someone had coached him. Probably Brielle, probably his mother. Two women who believed they knew how to dismantle me. I didn't answer right away. I poured tea, slowly, steadily, letting the quiet stretch exactly long enough to make him shift his weight. He hated silence from me. "Are you even listening?" he snapped. "I always listen," I murmured, placing a cup on the table, the ceramic making a soft, deliberate tap. He frowned, noticed the care in my movements, noticed the steadiness he couldn't explain. Good. Confusion was my ally. He sat down, shuffled through the divorce papers, and cleared his throat. "There's no reason to drag this out," he said. "Sign it by tomorrow, and I'll make sure the process stays." Civilized. Civilized. The word almost made me smile. He slid one page toward me, the transfer of estate ownership, watching my reaction like a hunter watching prey step toward a trap. But I didn't flinch. I traced the page with my eyes slowly, like I was reading it for the first time, like I hadn't already found the copies in his office, with half his plan spelled out in bold ink. Jason mistook my quiet for hesitation. He leaned closer. "This is best for everyone, May. The estate is too much for you to handle alone." There it was, the lie wrapped in false concern, a classic Jason move. But before I could answer, something unexpected happened. His phone buzzed, not the second phone, the main one, the one he kept on him like an extension of his hand. He stiffened. The screen lit up. Contractor. Confirming Monday start date. Full access granted? My spoon paused above the teacup. Jason's eyes flicked to mine, quick, nervous, before he slammed the phone face down on the table. He'd forgotten to silence notifications, a mistake a man makes only when he's too confident or too rushed. "Who was that?" I asked gently. "Nobody," he lied instantly. Too fast, too defensive. A small revelation, a crack widening under the weight of his own script. But that wasn't the only twist that night. As he droned on about the fairness of his settlement offer, another sound floated from the hallway, a soft chime. His second phone, still in his jacket. Still forgotten. He froze at the sound, jaw tightening. I recognized that stiffness. Fear wrapped in arrogance. He returned to his pitch, pretending nothing happened, but his eyes darted toward the jacket like a guilty child eyeing stolen candy. 2 phones buzzing, 2 lives colliding, 2 lies slipping out of their seams. Microtwist number 1. Then microtwist number 2 arrived, quietly. A car stopped outside. Not Brielle's shiny white SUV, not his mother's polished sedan, a dark sedan, windows tinted, engine humming low. Someone remained inside, watching. Jason noticed. His face went pale for half a breath before he masked it. He recognized that car, and he didn't want me to know why. "May," he said, voice suddenly tight. "Don't worry about the house. I'll handle everything." Handle. He meant, I'll take, I'll own. I'll erase. I sipped my tea. Let the warmth anchor me while his desperation seeped through every word he tried to disguise. Micro-twist number 3 came when he reached for a pen in his pocket, and a small folded note fell out. He didn't see it drop, but I did, and I knew that handwriting instantly. Same handwriting from the office note, his mother's. I picked it up with delicate fingers, holding it by the corner like evidence. Jason swallowed hard. "Give that back," he said too quickly, so I unfolded it slowly, letting him feel every second stretch around his lies like a tightening rope. Inside, in her sharp pen strokes, were the words, "Friday deadline is non-negotiable. She must be out. B is ready." He lunged for the note, but I closed my hand gently, calmly, like someone holding a secret with no intention of letting it slip too early. "Long day?" I asked softly. His breathing hitched. That single beautiful moment when a man realizes the ground beneath him is shifting and he doesn't know why. I set the note down beside the papers, sliding them toward him with a silent question hanging in the air. He didn't answer it. Couldn't. Instead, he stood abruptly, muttered something about making a phone call, and left the room with his shoulders rigid, phone pressed too tightly to his ear. While he paced outside, trying to hold his unraveling plan together with frantic whispers and half-truths, I watched him through the window. He thought he was fighting to protect his future. He didn't know I already held all the strings. Every lie he told, every plan he made, every ally he trusted. Every secret he buried, all of it sat quietly in my mind, arranged in neat rows like puzzle pieces ready to click into place. When he finally returned, his face was tight, his eyes calculating. He thought he was hiding panic, but I could see it, clear as day. And that's when something inside me sharpened into a single electric realization. The mystery wasn't what Jason was planning, it was how far he'd already gone. And I was about to uncover every last inch of it. Truth doesn't always explode. Sometimes it whispers. And the whisper hits harder than any scream. And that night, truth didn't arrive politely. It slid under my door like a shadow with teeth. Jason went to bed early, pretending exhaustion, pretending stress, pretending loyalty to the lies he'd wrapped himself in. I waited, quiet as a held breath. Once his snoring settled into its usual uneven pattern, the same pattern that used to comfort me and now felt like a countdown, I slipped out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The house was still. Still like it was listening. I opened the drawer under the old oak counter, the one where my grandmother kept her important things. Everyone thought it held recipe books. It didn't. Tucked in the very back was the original estate file. The file Jason never knew existed. The file he thought his mother had already burned through with her lawyers. I pulled it out, set it on the table, and opened it. But before I could read more than a page, the house phone rang, the landline, the one no one ever used. The sound sliced through the kitchen like a knife. My stomach tightened, not in fear, but in certainty. I answered. A calm male voice spoke. "Mrs. Whitlock? This is Detective Harmon. Your husband contacted us tonight regarding a claim he filed earlier this month about your mental instability." My pulse didn't spike. My grip didn't falter. I simply said, "Go on." We received a request from him to perform a wellness check. He expressed concern that you may be volatile. Volatile. The same word from his revised marriage agreement. Jason wasn't just planning to take the estate. He was laying the groundwork to paint me as unstable, legally removable, a liability, a threat. The detective continued, "We haven't acted on the claim yet. Something felt off. So I wanted to speak with you myself." His voice lowered. "Mrs. Whitlock, I'm going to be honest. Your husband's witnesses gave statements that felt rehearsed. Witnesses, plural. His mother. Brielle, and maybe one of his friends who owed him a favor. They'd already built the narrative. But the detective paused again, almost hesitant. "What's strange," he said quietly, "is that your medical records show no history of instability. In fact, someone attempted to access them illegally. Someone. Jason. And his mother." That was the moment the truth didn't just unfold. It stood up, stepped forward, and looked me in the eyes. They weren't trying to leave me. They were trying to legally neutralize me, to dissolve me like a stain they didn't want on their future. "Thank you, Detective," I said softly. "You've been very helpful." "If anything feels wrong," he added, "call me directly. I have concerns about your safety." But he didn't need to worry about my safety. Not anymore. I hung up the phone slowly, deliberately, as silence swelled around me like a tide. Then I turned back to the estate file. My grandmother wasn't a rich woman, but she was a brilliant one, and she knew exactly what kind of vultures existed in this world. Inside the file was a clause written in her looping cursive. In the event of the heir's marriage dissolving through cruelty, deceit, or coercion, the estate reverts solely to the bloodline heir. Spouses are disqualified from any claim. Cruelty, deceit, coercion. Jason had activated all three like a fool lighting matches near gasoline. I read the clause again, slower this time. Disqualified. Not reduced, not shared, disqualified. As in, no rights, no claims, no ownership. He had built his entire scheme on land he legally could never touch. His arrogance made him blind. His greed made him stupid. But that wasn't the only truth in the file. Behind the clause was a notarized letter addressed to me, written by my grandmother a year before she passed. I opened it, hands steady. "May, trust yourself when others try to unmake you. You come from women who survive storms by becoming storms." My breath caught, not with pain but with power. She knew someone would try to steal what she built. She knew someone would try to shrink me down. She prepared me for this moment long before Jason even existed in my life. But the biggest revelation wasn't the clause. It was the document, folded behind it. A deed, transferring the entire estate, solely into my name, with a protective trust that activated if any spouse attempted to take advantage of me. Jason hadn't triggered a divorce. He triggered a legal trap my grandmother built for predators like him. And the trust didn't just protect the property, it empowered me. It gave me full authority to remove anyone from the estate who posed a threat to its legacy, including him, including Brielle, including his mother. They hadn't just failed, they dug their own graves with notarized shovels. As all of this clicked into place, another small sound drifted into the kitchen. Floorboards. Soft, slow steps. Jason. He stood at the edge of the doorway, face half-shadowed, eyes darting between the file, my expression, and the phone, still slightly off its cradle. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice tight. I closed the file gently, rose from my chair, and turned to him with a calmness that made his breath hitch. "I'm reading the truth," I said softly. He swallowed. Hard. "What truth?" he snapped. But even in the dim light, I saw it. That flicker of fear behind his eyes, the kind guilty men get when they realize their secrets aren't secrets anymore. I stepped closer, close enough to see the pulse in his throat jump. Jason, I whispered, you should be very careful with the games you play in other people's houses. His jaw clenched. What does that mean? It means, I murmured, your plan isn't the only one in motion. His nostrils flared, his fists tightened, his confidence wavered, and I smiled, a small, quiet, devastating smile. Because in that moment, power shifted entirely. He didn't know what I knew. He didn't know how much he'd exposed. He didn't know how completely he'd underestimated me. But I did. I knew everything. And for the first time in months, he was the one standing in the dark. Jason stood in the doorway like a cornered animal, shoulders tight, breath thin, eyes scanning my face for answers he didn't deserve. He wasn't used to uncertainty. He wasn't used to me holding anything he couldn't predict. And that fear, oh, it looked good on him. May, he said slowly, whatever you think you know, you're wrong. There it was. The linemen like him use when they realize the leash they placed around your neck has snapped. I leaned one hand on the back of the chair, steady, quiet, deliberate. Then tell me, I whispered, what exactly am I wrong about? He blinked, a full second, then another. Because he couldn't answer without exposing himself, he tried anyway. You're making assumptions. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. Careful, I said softly, my voice slicing between us like a thin blade. That's the second time today someone tried to call me unstable. His breath hitched, barely, but beautifully. He stepped closer, his fake confidence cracking at the edges. May, you're scaring me. I tilted my head, studying him the way you study a man who's telling a lie he rehearsed in the rearview mirror of his car. You're scared, I murmured, because you think I'm catching up to your truth. He opened his mouth, maybe to deny it, maybe to lie again, but I didn't give him the chance. I slid the estate file forward across the table. It stopped at the edge, right in front of him. He looked down, saw the cover, went chalk white. You shouldn't have that, he whispered. Why not? I asked. It's mine. He swallowed hard. Where did you get it? The same place you hid your second phone, I replied calmly. In a place you thought I would never look. His eyes widened with a sharp, involuntary panic, the kind that reveals guilt without a single spoken word. Then something in him snapped forward, not physically, but mentally. He dropped the facade. Fine. Good. Show me the real man. May, he said, voice lowering into a cold, practiced tone. Things are already in motion. You fighting this will only make it harder on you. That was the moment, the peak, the truth exposed not by documents but by his own arrogance. Harder on me, I repeated, tasting the words. You're planning to destroy my life, Jason. Not just leave me, not just move on. His nostrils flared. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. No, I interrupted softly. You're under the pressure you created. His jaw twitched. He looked at the front door, the dark sedan still parked outside. He looked at me, calm, composed, dangerous. He was connecting dots too late. This isn't you, he said, voice trembling now. You're too gentle for all this. I stepped closer until our faces were inches apart. No, I whispered, I was gentle. You mistook that for weakness. His breath caught. I let silence stretch between us, tight, charged, razor thin. Then I delivered the blow that ended his delusion entirely. The estate trust activates when a spouse acts with deceit, Jason. It disqualifies you, legally, permanently. You've already executed your own removal. His face collapsed, his shoulders sagged, his mouth opened but nothing came out. He realized it. He had lost, not in the future, not in some war he hoped to win, but now, this moment, this breath. Everything he schemed for was gone the second he betrayed me. He stepped back, shaking his head like the truth might shift if he denied it enough. "You're lying," he whispered. "You're welcome to call the lawyer who helped you file those agreements," I said. "Ask him if a trust dissolves when a spouse commits coercion." He froze. He didn't have to call. He knew. He knew. His hand gripped the chair so tight the wood creaked. "May, please," he said suddenly, desperately. "We can talk about this. We can fix this." There it was, the reversal, predictable as sunrise. He wasn't pleading for me. He was pleading for the life he tried to build on top of mine. I took a step back, letting the cold distance settle between us like a final wall. "I'm done talking," I said. "I'm done being erased." He flinched. Not at the words, but at the tone. Calm, resolved, unmovable. And just like that, the betrayal reached its peak, and the power shifted entirely to me. Jason didn't sleep that night. I could hear him pacing the hallway, muttering into his phone, opening drawers, slamming them shut. He was scrambling, like a rat discovering the walls of the maze were closing in. But me? I slept fine, because morning was coming, and with it, justice. Not the loud kind, not the screaming, plate-throwing soap opera kind. No, the kind that walks into a room quietly and rearranges the power structure without raising its voice. The next day, everything unfolded in 3 precise steps. Step 1, the meeting. Jason's mother arrived first, stomping into the estate like she owned the soil, the walls, the air. "May," she snapped, "we're here to finalize the terms. I hope you've had enough time to think clearly." Think clearly. The irony was delicious. Then Brielle walked in behind her, perfume thick, lips glossy, wearing a smile built from stolen confidence. She held Jason's hand like a prize. "Morning, May," she said sweetly. "We really want this to stay amicable." Amicable. Another word thieves love. Jason followed them, eyes darting toward me with nervous flickers he couldn't hide. I poured myself a cup of tea, slow and steady, then looked at all 3 of them. "You're right," I said, voice calm. "Today changes everything." That made them exchange glances, pleased, smug, certain I was about to surrender. They had no idea they were sitting on a cliff. His mother pulled out the revised agreement, the same one calling me mentally unstable. "Sign here," she ordered. I smiled politely. I actually invited someone else to join us. "Who?" Jason snapped. The doorbell answered for me. Brielle's smile faltered. His mother stiffened. Jason went pale. I opened the door. Detective Harmon, notebook in hand, badge gleaming. "Mrs. Whitlock," he greeted warmly, "you said this meeting would be informative." Jason nearly choked. His mother's jaw dropped. Brielle stumbled back a step. Perfect. I motioned toward the table. "Shall we begin?" Step 2, exposure. Detective Harmon took a seat, pen ready. "I understand," he began, "that there were concerns raised about Mrs. Whitlock's mental stability." Jason stuttered. Actually stuttered. Well, yes, she's been under stress and she wasn't herself." "Funny," the detective interrupted, flipping open a file. "Because your wife has no medical history supporting that claim, but someone accessed her records illegally, and 3 statements were submitted using identical phrasing." Jason's mother's face drained of color. Brielle's hand squeezed Jason's arm. I sipped my tea. The detective continued. "You also filed a request for a wellness intervention, based on fabricated testimony." Jason opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. "Would you like to explain, Mr. Whitlock?" the detective asked. Silence. A thick, heavy, guilty silence. Then I set the estate file on the table and slid it toward the detective. "This," I said gently, "is the truth they didn't expect anyone to find." The detective skimmed the clause, raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Fraud, coercion, and intent to dispossess a legal heir. "Serious offenses." Jason's mother lunged forward. That clause is outdated. The detective cut her off. Ma'am, it's notarized, valid, and enforceable. And your signatures. He lifted the illegal revised agreement. Create a legal trail. Jason's lips trembled. May, please. But justice wasn't done yet. I placed the engagement ring on the table, the one engraved. To my future. Jay Briel's jaw dropped. Jason's face collapsed. His mother slapped the table. What is that? The ring your son bought, I said calmly, while still married, using funds from this estate. The detective nodded slowly. Illegal use of marital assets, fraud, possibly grand larceny depending on value. Jason sank into his chair, and then, with ruthless quietness, I closed the trap. The protective trust has already activated, I told them. The estate is legally mine alone. Jason has zero claim. Zero. The word hit the room like a silent explosion. Brielle gasped. Jason's mother looked like she might faint. Jason finally whispered, broken, May, you're ruining my life. I set my teacup down. No, I said softly, you ruined your life the moment you tried to erase mine. Step 3, removal. Detective Harmon stood, jotting down final notes. I'll be filing the report today. Mrs. Whitlock, you'll receive updates. Mr. Whitlock, expect to be contacted by my department regarding fraud charges. Jason's head dropped into his hands. His mother sputtered like a kettle left on too long. This is a setup. She manipulated you. Detective Harmon turned sharply. The only person manipulating anything here is your son, and possibly you. He walked to the door. Have a good day. Mrs. Whitlock, stay safe. I nodded. Then I turned to the 3 people who tried to dismantle my life. You have 10 minutes, I said quietly, to leave this property, permanently. Brielle scoffed. You can't. The trust gives her full authority, the detective said from the doorway. She can remove anyone posing a threat to the estate's legacy. That includes you. Brielle's mouth snapped shut. Jason's mother grabbed her purse, face red with humiliation. This isn't over, she hissed. Oh, it is, I replied gently. You just don't like how it ended. Jason stood last, eyes hollow, voice shaking. I loved you, May. I looked at him with a calmness he had never seen. No, Jason, you loved control, and when you lost it, you mistook that for losing me. He swallowed hard. And I delivered the final blow with a softness that shattered him. You are now trespassing. They left. 3 shadows stumbling out of a house they thought they owned. 3 people who had carved a plan to replace me, now facing the door slamming behind them. And as the lock clicked, justice landed exactly where it needed to. Quiet, precise, final. The house felt different after they left, not quieter. Silence had lived here long before the truth surfaced. Not safer. Danger had never frightened me the way betrayal had. No. The house felt lighter, as if the walls could finally breathe again. I walked through each room slowly, touching the furniture, the door frames, the window sills, not checking for damage, checking for myself. For the first time in months, I felt present in my own home, in my own skin, in my own story. I ended up in the kitchen, where the kettle I'd boiled earlier still sat, full of warm water. Steam had faded, but the essence lingered. A quiet echo of the moment everything turned. I poured one final cup of tea, that same gentle ritual I had used the night before, when everything was chaos beneath the calm. Now it was peace beneath the power, a perfect reversal. I sat at the table, the estate file closed beside me. Not a weapon anymore, not a shield, just truth. Documented, sealed, complete. My hands wrapped around the cup, and I let the warmth seep into my palms. Tea. The same symbolic thread that wove through every moment I needed strength. The same act I used to steady my breath as Jason lied. The same act I used to anchor myself before facing the storm. and now it tasted different, still warm, still familiar. But infused with freedom, I hadn't realized I'd forgotten how to taste. Outside, I could hear the car engines, Jason's mother's sharp honking, Brielle's angry revving, Jason's barely there sob catching in the wind. Their chaos drifted down the driveway and dissolved into distance. Not my concern anymore, not my burden, not my future. Inside my chest, something finally loosened. A tension I'd carried so long I'd started believing it was part of me. It wasn't. It belonged to them, and now it was gone. I looked around the kitchen, my grandmother's kitchen, and whispered softly, "I kept us safe." The words floated through the air, settling into the walls the way her wisdom always had. No victory speech, no celebration, just quiet acknowledgement. Survival doesn't always scream. Sometimes it simply exhales. As the sun dipped behind the trees, light poured through the window in warm sheets, landing on the ring Jason bought for Brielle, the one still sitting exactly where I left it on the table, a gaudy, heavy symbol of everything he tried to build on a lie. I picked it up, turned it between my fingers. The engraving glimmered in the fading light. To my future. J.A. bitter, foolish promise. I set it gently inside a drawer, not to keep, not to cherish, but to remember. Remember the cost. Remember the warning. Remember the strength I regained the moment I chose myself. Then I closed the drawer with a soft click, a full stop, a punctuation mark on a story that no longer controlled me. That night, for the first time in what felt like years, I slept without fear clawing at my lungs. No second phone buzzing. No lies threading through the walls. No footsteps paced in secrecy. Just stillness. A stillness earned. Not peaceful because there was no storm. Peaceful because I had walked through it and come out whole. The estate rested. I rested. The story settled, waiting for its final word. Not victory, not revenge, just clarity. And clarity is the quietest triumph of all. 5 years slipped by like pages in a book I no longer needed to reread. The estate stands stronger now than it ever did. Restored, protected, alive. New paint on old walls, fresh roots in ancient soil, gardens blooming where neglect once tried to take hold. I don't wander through it with fear anymore. I walk with ownership, with quiet pride, with peace. I added a greenhouse last spring, something my grandmother always dreamed of but never had the time or money to build. Now it glows at night like a lantern in the dark, filled with herbs, small fruit trees, and the scent of soil after rain. Sometimes I stand inside it barefoot, letting the earth cool my skin, remembering the woman I was the night Jason tried to erase me. I don't resent her, I honor her, because she stayed calm when the world tried to unmake her. She observed when others tried to blind her. She held steady while they plotted over her head, and she survived. As for Jason, his life fell apart faster than his lies did. The fraud investigation led to probation, fines, and the kind of reputation ruin you can't hide with a new girlfriend or a new job title. Last I heard, he moved 3 states away, working a job that pays just enough to remind him what he almost stole. Brielle left him 6 months after the scandal, traded him for someone with less baggage and more money. His mother pretends none of it happened. That's fine. People like her drown in denial. I don't need to add water. Some evenings, when the light hits the kitchen window just right, I sit with a cup of tea. The same ritual that carried me through the darkest parts of this story. I sip slowly. Calm surface. Storm beneath. But this time, the storm is gone. Only clarity remains. And when I think back on the moment Jason threw divorce papers at me to impress his new girlfriend, when I think of how hard he tried to leave me behind, I smile. Because every betrayal he planned, every trap he set, every lie he told pushed me toward the future I was always meant to claim. And now Now I understand something I wish I'd learned sooner. Sometimes being left behind is the fastest way to get ahead. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever trusted the wrong people, this story is for you.